So my review of ASUS's ROG Strix RTX 3070 took a lot longer than usual to get out, partly because of a bout of bad food poisoning and a horrifying trip to the dentist, but mostly because of AMD. See, before AMD unveiled their Radeon RX 6000 series cards, all of the current RTX 30 series cards were pretty much no-brainers, especially the RTX 3070, delivering a similar level of performance to the 2080 Ti at less than half the price, which is phenomenal in its own right. But now things aren't nearly as cut and dry. The RX 6000 series cards have arrived, and along with them benchmarks from trustworthy independent reviewers, and what those benchmarks are showing us is that the RX 6800 comes out on top over the 3070 almost across the board. And in some of the games does so by, a lot. While all of that does mean a pretty major hit to the value proposition of the RTX 3070, it doesn't completely eliminate it. The RX 6800 is still a more expensive card than the 3070, so the 3070 still has a place on the market and should still be a very attractive option to a lot of people. And very few options are more attractive than the ASUS ROG Strix RTX 3070. So let's jump right into the review. But first, as always, I'll be leaving affiliate links to the parts I'll be mentioning down below if you want to pick them up and help the channel while you're at it. And for my fellow South Africans, I'll also drop a link down there to Wootware, just because I like you guys and I know Wootware will take very good care of you. Now, I think I've said this before in one of my other reviews, but I think a lot of the manufacturers have really missed the mark when it comes to the designs of their RTX 30 series cards. Some are just like okay, a few go way over the top, and others just look like they're definitely not living their best life. The Strix 3070, however, is not one of those cards. This thing is on an entirely different level. I mentioned how much I like the design of this thing in that video where I built a all ROG PC blind, so go check that out if you haven't already. But having spent even more time with it now, I like the card a lot more. Instead of matte black everything like the previous generations of Strix cards, we finally got some more character to work with here and a generally more premium looking card all around. The mix of premium plastic with metal accents along with a silver, gray, black color scheme is really just eye-popping. Add to that the little details like exposed and raised screws, the Strix branding and etching on the shroud as well as on the side of the card, and the prerequisite little GeForce RTX badge to cap it all off. And the whole thing has this industrial, almost gamery design to it that just looks better every time I look at it. That whole industrial look isn't just for show either, as the card has some good weight to it, features reinforcements out the wazoo, and just feels like if you drop this card on the floor, you'd break the floor rather than the card. Disclaimer, don't drop this card on the floor or anywhere else for that matter. Especially since it's supposed to be selling for a massive $600. And let's be real here, probably for a lot more than that, at least for right now, but we'll dig into pricing a little later into the video. RGB wise, I'm not exactly sure how to feel here. On the one hand, we've got a massive RGB lighting zone in the front that stretches the entire length of the card, one that's really well diffused with pretty much no LEDs visible at all, and we've even got some decent illumination on the fans going on as well. But on the other hand, I'm not totally sold on the whole zebra pattern ROG's working with here. I love that it's unique, and I love that ROG's experimenting with new designs, but something about it just makes me feel slightly uncomfortable for some reason. Maybe it's the South African in me and it's zebra appropriation or something, I don't know. And as classy and minimalistic as the lighting on the fans is, I can't help but wish it was a little brighter, especially with the black fans not really being able to show off the lighting in any kind of big way. That being said, weird lighting is better than no lighting in my book, and even if you don't want to use any of the included effects, some of which are actually pretty good, the card still looks fantastic with the lights snuffed out entirely. Like I already said, the card is an absolute unit. It's just about 3 slots thick, features a fully reinforced frame, a very sturdy backplate, and a host of some of the highest quality components you'll be able to find on an RTX 3070, including high-end chokes, capacitors, a very beefy power delivery system that should take full advantage of the card's dual 8-pin connectors. A large, densely packed heatsink, complete with 7 heat pipes, a smooth cold plate, should spread out heat from the GPU and other toasty components out pretty evenly, all while the 3 new Axial Tech fans work on getting cool air into the GPU and hot air out. Something it should do pretty efficiently due to a cutout on the backplate that allows air to flow right through the side of the card, and the counter rotation of the center fan, which reduces turbulence, further boosting cooler performance and reducing noise at the same time. Some other notable features here before we jump into a couple of benchmarks are that the card has a dual bias switch, which is always appreciated, 3 DisplayPort 1.4 and 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. And it also features 2 fan connectors right on the PCB itself, letting you hook up whatever fans you want to the card directly, which is just stupidly cool. Now, for this round of benchmarks, I won't be including all of the ones I ran just because this isn't my first RTX 3070 rodeo. At stock settings, almost all of the 3070 models perform very similarly to each other, so if you want to see more numbers, just check out my other review over here. The system we're using to test this bad boy has a Core i7-10700 plugged into a Z490 motherboard with Cooler Master's Master Liquid ML240 handling the cooling. Then we have the gorgeously fast 32GB kit of G.Skill Trident Z Neo memory running at 3600 MHz CL16, along with the Sabrent Rocket PCIe 4.0 M.2 as our main game drive, both of which super lovingly provided by Woodware. And first up, let's take a look at 1080p performance, and even though we're primarily CPU bound at this resolution, the card still performs remarkably well, whether we're looking at sightseeing games like Metro Exodus or fast-paced competitive titles like Warzone. The only time the card showed even a hint of struggling was in the notoriously hard-hitting Metro Exodus with settings cranked to the max, where it got just under 50 FPS in the 1% lows. But even so, the game still ran smooth as butter with more than 100 FPS average. Moving on to 1440p, the resolution you should be buying this card for, we're seeing similarly impressive numbers thanks to our CPU loosening its grip on the card's performance. Across the board, we're seeing extremely solid numbers, whether we're looking at average frame rates or 1% lows. And again, these are with quality settings almost pushed to the max in each of the titles we tested. 1440p, high frame rate, high quality settings is where this card really struts its stuff. That doesn't mean that the card is a slouch at 4K though, as it handles that resolution just fine too. Obviously the numbers aren't as obvious slap in your face impressive as with the other resolutions, but that's pretty much a given with the high settings we were using here. With these settings, we're getting about a 60 FPS average in most of the titles, with remarkably tight 1% lows, making for a very consistent and very smooth experience overall. But of course, if you're looking for high frame rates to go along with your extremely high resolution, lowering the quality settings just a little bit is a very worthy trade-off. Lastly, let's turn on RTX and see how the 3070 stacks up against its much beefier and much more expensive siblings at 1440p. And surprisingly, it actually holds up really well, considering the RTX 3070 ships with a good chunk fewer RT and tensor cores. The card managed to hit and surpass an average of 60 FPS in all but one of the titles tested, and this was with RTX completely maxed out. Of course, the LSS is definitely doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, but even so, the card is bringing ray tracing to the masses in a way where it's actually a setting worth turning on. And I think that's just awesome. With all those benchmarks done, the card only managed to hit a max temperature of 74 degrees, which is a little hot for sure, but then again, so is South Africa, as the ambient temp during testing was about 30 friggin' degrees. Someone please join my Patreon so I can buy an AC unit. Please. While the ambient temp does do a pretty good job at explaining the higher than expected temps, the fact that the card also maxed out at 293 watts of power draw makes the picture even clearer. And it also shows that there's a lot of overclocking headroom here. ASUS clearly built the RTX 3070 Strix for max performance over pretty much anything else, as the card wasn't exactly the quietest one I've ever tested, maxing out at a fan speed of 64% or 1509 RPM. At that level, the card was definitely what I'd call audible, but still not nearly enough to be distracting in any way, and it's just a subtle reminder that it's working as it should, and I actually found it kind of comforting. And to be fair, the cards very rarely ran that hot and very rarely hit that fan speed during normal gameplay. It's just after hours of benchmarking that it actually got to that level. At 100% fan speed with Firmark pushing the card to its limits, it just barely hit the annoyance level, but at that fan speed, the card only maxed out at 55 degrees, which is just insane considering the ambient temp at the time. So, like I mentioned, the RTX 3070 Strix is an absolute monster of a card, with a focus on performance I haven't experienced before on any 3070. So much so that even though I wasn't able to overclock it myself due to time limitations, Gamers Nexus did, and they got their highest 3070 OC by maxing out its core clock to 2175 MHz, which is just, that's nuts. But it also starts at $600. And with the stock shortage going on, you're not gonna find it at that price for a very long time to come. Such a premium card at such a premium price just seems a little overkill for the 3070. At that price, it's coming mighty close to the price of some of the cheaper RTX 3080 models. And if that alone didn't make it hard enough to justify, AMD's RX 6800 definitely does. As I mentioned, the 6800 outperforms the RTX 3070 by a very significant margin from all of the benchmarks I've seen. And that margin is meaningful enough that at its launch price of $579, it could just be the most brain-dead obvious choice here. So with the current market being what it is, and with the 6800 beating the 3070, the question here really becomes, do you want to overpay for a really premium RTX 3070, or do you want to overpay for pretty much any RX 6800 that'll give you a fairly decent performance edge? But that's a question we'd be better off trying to answer after I get my hands on the new cards to test out personally. So come on AMD, hook your boy up. So yeah, huge thanks to ASUS South Africa for letting me get my greasy paws all over your gorgeous card, and remember to use my affiliate link in the description down below if you want to pick up any of the parts featured in the video. It costs you nothing, but it helps the channel out a lot. Or if you're in South Africa, just go to Wootware, they'll have you covered for whatever PC hardware you need, and then some. So check them out in the link in the description down below while you're at it. So yeah, exciting times ahead. Hope you're all having a good one, and I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.